What's going on, Vikings Nation? If you're a true fan of the Minnesota Vikings, you're going to want to pay very close attention to this one. Because the NFL just confirmed something that could quietly become one of the most important assets for Minnesota heading into the 2026 NFL Draft. And yes, it all connects back to Sam Darnold. That's right. A move that many fans debated for months has now officially turned into something valuable for the Vikings organization. The NFL announced that the Minnesota Vikings will receive a compensatory third-round draft pick after losing Sam Darnold in free agency. And that means Minnesota is officially getting pick number 97 in the 2026 NFL Draft. Now here's the big question, Vikings fans. Could this pick turn into the next hidden gem for the franchise? Stick with me until the end because we're going to break down exactly why the Minnesota Vikings received this pick, what it means for the future of the roster, and which players could realistically be on the board when the Vikings are finally on the clock. And trust me, some of these names could become very interesting fits in purple and gold. Vikings fans, the big news dropped when the NFL officially released the list of compensatory picks for the 2026 draft. These selections are awarded to teams that lose more or better free agents than they signed the previous year. And in this case, the Minnesota Vikings qualified thanks to the departure of quarterback Sam Darnold during the 2025 free agency period. When Darnold left Minnesota, the move didn't exactly shock the NFL world. The Vikings were already preparing for the future with young quarterback J.J. McCarthy, and letting Darnold walk was part of the team's long-term roster strategy. But what many fans hoped for at the time was exactly what just happened. A valuable compensatory pick in return. And now it's official. The Minnesota Vikings will select at number 97 overall, the very first compensatory pick in the third round. That might not sound huge at first, but Vikings fans know that this is exactly the type of pick where great front offices find serious value. To really understand why this matters, we have to talk about how the compensatory pick formula works. The NFL calculates these selections based on contracts signed, playing time, and postseason honors for players who leave their original teams in free agency. The better the contract and impact of the player, the higher the potential compensatory reward. In the case of the Minnesota Vikings, losing Sam Darnold helped push the formula in their favor. Minnesota didn't overspend in free agency that year, which preserved their eligibility for the pick. That strategic patience from the Vikings front office ended up paying off with an extra selection in one of the most valuable parts of the draft. For a team trying to reload talent and build around young stars, adding a third-round pick is massive. Because historically, that range of the draft has produced starting players, impact defenders, and sometimes even future Pro Bowl talent. So this is far more than just a small consolation prize. Now, Vikings fans, let's address something important here. Some reports floating around online claim that Sam Darnold's new team went on to win the Super Bowl. But that information is not accurate. There is no record of Darnold leading a Super Bowl-winning team after leaving Minnesota. What is accurate is that his departure helped the Minnesota Vikings qualify for this compensatory selection. And that alone makes the move meaningful from a roster-building perspective. Sometimes the value of a player leaving isn't just cap space. It's what you can turn that opportunity into during the draft. And now the Vikings have that opportunity sitting right there at pick number 97. As of right now, the Minnesota Vikings have 9 total draft picks heading into the 2026 NFL Draft. That gives the front office flexibility to move up, trade down, or simply load the roster with young talent. And if we know anything about modern roster building in the NFL, it's that depth wins championships. That means this compensatory pick could become part of a much bigger strategy. Maybe the Vikings package it in a trade. Maybe they use it to grab a developmental starter. Or maybe it becomes another offensive weapon to support the team's young quarterback. Whatever happens, having more picks gives Minnesota more ways to shape the future of the franchise. One player who could benefit from a stronger offensive environment is wide receiver Ty Felton. The Vikings selected Felton in the third round previously, and his rookie season was quiet offensively. He saw limited targets and only a small number of offensive snaps. However, Felton made a noticeable impact on special teams, logging nearly 300 snaps and contributing in the return game. That kind of versatility is valuable for young players trying to earn a bigger role in the offense. Still, Vikings fans know that a third-round receiver comes with expectations. The coaching staff will likely look for ways to involve him more in the offense moving forward. And if the quarterback situation stabilizes, Felton could still develop into a meaningful contributor for the Minnesota Vikings offense. Speaking of quarterbacks, the Vikings offense went through plenty of turbulence during the 2025 season. Rookie quarterback J.J. McCarthy had an uneven start before showing improvement later in the year, while backup options were used at different points during the season as the team searched for consistency. That kind of instability can make it difficult for young skill players to develop rhythm and chemistry. Wide receivers depend heavily on timing, trust, and consistent quarterback play. When that foundation isn't stable, offensive production often suffers. But if McCarthy continues to grow and the offense finds stability, players like Felton could benefit significantly. A more consistent passing attack could unlock much more production from the young receiver group. Now let's talk about the exciting part for Vikings fans. Who could actually be available when Minnesota is on the clock at pick 97? This range of the draft is usually packed with talented prospects who slipped through the earlier rounds. It's where teams often find starting caliber defensive backs, explosive running backs, developmental offensive linemen, and high-upside pass rushers. Some of the interesting names projected around this range include players like running back Nick Singleton, edge rusher L.T. Overton, linebacker Deontay Lawson, and cornerback Malik Muhammad. Each of those players brings a different skill set that could potentially help strengthen the Minnesota Vikings roster. And depending on how free agency unfolds, the Vikings might prioritize defensive depth, offensive line help, or another playmaker for the offense. That decision will ultimately depend on how the roster looks by the time the draft arrives. Another thing Vikings fans should watch closely is how the front office approaches draft strategy this year. Having 9 total picks gives Minnesota room to be aggressive if they fall in love with a prospect. We've seen teams package mid-round picks to move up for players they believe in. And with this compensatory selection now secured, the Vikings have another valuable chip they could potentially use on draft weekend. So whether pick 97 becomes a trade asset or the next hidden gem on the roster, it's officially part of the Vikings' arsenal heading into the 2026 NFL Draft. And that brings us to the biggest question of all, Vikings Nation. What should Minnesota do with this pick? Should the Vikings target a defensive playmaker? Add another weapon for the offense? Or maybe find a running back who could energize the ground game? I want to hear from you. Drop your opinion right now in the comments. If you were running the Minnesota Vikings draft room, who would you take with pick number 97? And if you love staying updated with the latest Minnesota Vikings news, rumors, and draft breakdowns, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with other Vikings fans. Because here we talk Minnesota Vikings football every single day. SKOL Vikings. Purple circle, yellow heart.